Orcinus orca, also known as the killer whale or the orca, is a beautiful creature. It is an apex predator, meaning it has no hunters, and is called the wolf of the sea due to its incredible social structure, especially in hunting. The name killer whale is actually a mistranslation from a Spanish term that meant whale killer. For the remainder of this video, I'll be using the term orca. Orcas are mammals, but even though they are carnivores, they are not found under the order Carnivora. They are actually found under the order Artiodactyla, which encompasses all even-toed ungulates, such as sheep, goats, cows, pigs, giraffes, etc. And as they are dolphins, they are found under the family Delphinidae. Orcas are black with a white underbelly and their iconic white eye spots. Some geographical variants will have a little white cape right behind their dorsal fin. Males will typically have a larger, taller, triangular dorsal fin, whereas females will have a slightly curved, smaller dorsal fin, but still relatively triangular. Males are also much larger, ranging from 6 to 8 meters or 20 to 26 feet, and weigh 6 tons, whereas females will range from 5 to 7 meters or 16 to 23 feet, and weigh around 3 to 4 tons. The average life expectancy for female orcas is around 50 years old, with maxing out at around 90 years old and maturing sexually at 10, while the male life expectancy is around 29 years, usually maxing around 60 and maturing at 15. The orca's distribution is worldwide, being found in all the oceans and in most seas, although they seem to prefer higher latitudes and prefer to hang around the coasts rather than open water. Case in point, densities seem to be higher in the North Atlantic, such as in Greenland, Iceland, Scandinavia, as well as off Baffin Island in Canada. The northeastern Pacific coasts, such as in British Columbia, Alaska, the western United States, and Mexico, as well as around Antarctica. Because they have such a worldwide distribution, there is going to be some variation. For example, on the northwest Pacific coast, there tends to be 3 types. There's the resident population, which tends to reside in Puget Sound, right around British Columbia and Washington, feeding mainly on fish and sometimes squid. Transient orcas, usually traveling along the coast and feeding mainly on marine mammals. And offshore, usually residing in open waters and feeding on fish and sharks. Residents tend to be easier to study as they're much closer and tend to be a little more numerous. In resident orcas, pods tend to be much larger and tend to be a lot more relatable, having family lines usually stemming from a matriarch. In these pods, children will tend to stay with their mother their entire lives, usually branching out until with pods with 4 or 5 generations. Contrast that with transient pods, which tend to be a bit smaller, usually composing of 3 or 4 individuals, and are usually a mother and 1 or 2 of her calves. There also tends to be a lot more vocalization and calling in resident pods compared to transient pods. Offshore orcas tend to be pretty similar to resident orcas, just living in different locations. They tend to have larger pods of around 50 and do have a similar diet to residents, eating mostly fish. One thing that is noticed is that their tooth structure tends to be a bit different depending on what they eat. Offshore orca teeth tend to be a little bit more worn down, seeing as they're biting through shark hides and such, which really tends to wear them down. Contrast that with the other two, where they're eating either salmon or marine mammals, and it's not nearly as degrading. There's also the physical appearance, which tends to differ. These variants will often have difference in appearances. For example, transients tend to have a more angular and sharper fin, as well as having notches in their fin, whereas the other two tend to be a little more round in their dorsal fins, which may be a sign of the traveling nature of transient orcas having to deal with other mammals in which they eat. But talking about their hunting and their social structure really makes you wonder about their intelligence. I mean, they are highly intelligent as dolphins go, and this is this intelligence that makes them, I guess, attractive for captivity, which is something I don't really condone. But it is their intelligence that actually brought them into captivity once it was learned that are able to learn all these cool tricks. But aside from using their intelligence in captivity, we do know that they can use this intelligence in incredible ways for hunting. But combining intelligence and teamwork allows them to take larger prey, such as whales, or in some instances, knocking seals off ice in the Antarctic. One feat that might be contributed to their intelligence that always gets me is the way they're able to incapacitate sharks just by flipping over, leaving them helpless and free to eat. But bringing up their role in captivity usually does bring up their conservation. Due to their worldwide distribution, it is really hard to categorize their conservation status, which usually leads to classify certain populations under certain statuses. Certain populations are often classified as endangered due to certain threats such as oil spills, pollution, water traffic, anything like that. A good example is the southern resident population aforementioned in the Puget Sound near Washington and BC. There are three pods ranging from 20 to 30 individuals each, and this population, like others, is endangered due to the previously mentioned threats as well as prey deficiency as salmon fishing goes on in that area. While I'm not too fond of the current Canadian level government, one move that I do approve of is they cut back on the commercial salmon fishing out west, which could potentially help the orca population out there. But now there's another issue regarding pipelines going out west, specifically the Trans Mountain Pipeline extension going to Vancouver. If this pipeline were to be built, it would mean more water traffic in the Vancouver and Puget Sound area, and also a possible increased chance of oil spilling. I'm kind of on the fence about this one. On one hand, I do want my country to flourish economically. On the other hand, I don't want to see any West Coast species suffer because of it. These are beautiful creatures, and I do appreciate all the measures taken to preserve and conserve these creatures. From the Endangered Species Act to restricting the amount of distance one can approach these creatures in order to keep them from. I don't want to see any species go extinct or extirpated, but if people are made aware, maybe conservation efforts can increase. I've only seen orcas in the wild once, when I went out to British Columbia almost a decade ago. I hope to see them again, maybe even take a trip to Scandinavia and maybe possibly snorkel with them. But if I don't, I hope that they last long enough for others to enjoy them and to see conservation efforts be rewarded. Thanks for watching.